Blog Talk Radio.
Hello, everyone. This is Laurie Smith on Blog Talk Radio. Good morning. It is 6 o'clock here in the morning, Calgary, Alberta, Tuesday morning, February the 15th. I'm happy to be here. This is One Child Abuse Survivor to Another, and we're on for 30 minutes. It's a live internet streaming radio broadcast from blogtalkradio.com. Chat room is open, and I'll pop the link into there to what we're talking about this week and last week, looking at a PDF from the child trauma. And, yeah, hopefully everybody's getting something out of this. It's regarding attachment and healthy bonding, healthy attachments and bonding, and sort of taking a look at what happens when children don't get that, and they're, especially abused and maltreated children, what can happen, and sort of the effects of not having that healthy development from the maternal attachment and the maternal bonding that's supposed to happen, and even the paternal bonding, I think. But so, I'm not a counselor or therapist. I'm just a private citizen paying to do my own blog talk shows, and that's just to bring out information that I find helpful, and, just to be another voice out here for people just speaking out against abuse and standing up to say that, we got to stop child abuse, and standing up for survivors. There's so many survivors out here that, I know for sure. I mean, it's absolutely crazy how many people have been abused, and it's ridiculous, and it's like something has to be done. The more voices we have speaking out and the more voices we have breaking the silence, I think the better off this planet will be, because silence has always been an issue regarding child abuse, if not one of the main issues, because it's always, nobody wants to hear about it. It's always swept under the carpet. It's, hidden behind locked doors. Let's just keep this quiet, keep this in the family type thing, or, the abusers, of course, want it silenced so that they can continue to do what they do and don't get busted. Survivors many times can't speak out for fear of their lives and fear of retribution and all kinds of stuff, and also just the whole shame connected with it, and the rage, and just the whole issue of not wanting to disclose something as horrific as these situations that we find ourselves in. And so that's why I'm doing this, just to be one more voice out here. There's a lot of voices out here, and I just wanted to be one more. So thanks everybody for tuning in. I appreciate it. And anybody under the age of 18, I just ask that you have permission to listen to my shows. You should have an adult listen to the show with you, and they can help you make a decision on whether it's age appropriate for your age. There's a lot of adult content on my shows. I just feel like children should be protected at all times. So anybody under the age of 18, have permission to listen to my show, and everybody else listen at your own discretion, because I'm talking about abuse and very sensitive subject. Abuse makes a lot of people uncomfortable, and talking about it makes a lot of people uncomfortable. It doesn't make me uncomfortable to talk about it. It made me really uncomfortable to be abused, but I don't mind talking about it. So, but a lot of people do find the material very sensitive. So you have to listen at your own discretion. If you find that it makes you uncomfortable, it's clearly your discretion to turn it off, right? So you listen at your own discretion. So we'll get right into this particular topic again, talking about the issues of bonding and attachment in maltreated children. And this was from the Child Trauma Academy, www.childtrauma.org. It's a PDF that was written by Bruce Perry. I believe it's Bruce D. Perry. So I'm going to just scroll up here and see if I can get his full name for you. It's called Bonding and Attachment in Maltreated Children, Consequences of Emotional Neglect in Childhood. And it was written by Bruce D. Perry, MD. And just goes in, he just introduces the whole idea of what is attachment, and what is bonding, and then the whole issues of, if a child misses out on these important experiences as bonding and healthy attachments, then there can be some real issues with people. Not everyone would experience the same things. That's why, many survivors say, well, I must have this, or I must have that, or I must have PTSD or this and that. And I really rarely diagnose myself, because I've never been diagnosed by a clinical, professional who can make such a diagnosis, right? So I don't diagnose myself. I just look at what's out there, and if I relate to it, I do. If I don't, I don't. But I don't ever say, oh, well, I've got this, or oh, well, I've got that. I just know that some of the symptoms that I have are very similar to what they're talking about as far as adult survivors go. But, it's better that we don't diagnose ourselves, because we should have a professional doing that, right? I never make any assumptions on, well, I must be this or I must be that because of the abuse that I suffered. I just relate to a lot of it, If I wanted to go get a diagnosis, I'd go get a diagnosis. And I think that's the That's the important thing. If a person's suffering along with something and thinks, well, maybe I've got this or maybe I've got that, it's better to go get a diagnosis if you're really concerned about it, because we can't really make those assumptions, right? Not everybody would have PTSD, and not everybody would have dissociative disorder. Not everybody would have these things. Some people do, and some people don't. But they do talk about the issues of, like, what other factors influence bonding and attachment, and that's, talking about the infant, the caregiver, and whatnot. So I'll just read through here, and I'll pop this actual PDF into the chat room here. So if anybody's in there, you can check this out. And it's from childtrauma.org, www.childtrauma.org/images/stories/articles, and then /ATTCAR 4, the number 4, _03 _V2 _R.pdf. And then I'll pop this into the chat room here. That's for anybody who's listening to the archive or just catching this from somewhere else other than my chat room. And but I found it just by looking at the Child Trauma Academy's website, and then they had some resources there, and this was all about bonding and attachment. So it says any factors that interfere with bonding experiences can interfere with the development of attachment capabilities. When the interactive reciprocal dance between the caregiver and infant is disrupted or difficult, bonding experiences are difficult to maintain. Disruptions can occur because of primary problems with the infant, the caregiver, the environment, or the fit between the infant and caregiver. And he talks about the infant here. He says the child's personality or temperament influences bonding. If an infant is difficult to soothe, irritable, or unresponsive compared to a calm, self-soothing child, he or she will have more difficulty developing a secure attachment. And the infant's ability to participate in the maternal-infant interaction may be compromised due to a medical condition such as prematurity, birth defect, or illness. And that's a big issue because many children have these issues of being born with some type of ailment, illness, or like they said here, birth defect or prematurity, and then can't really, because maybe they're sickly and just always crying, or just not able to the mother and the parents aren't able to calm the child or to make the child feel better. They might not be able to develop that closeness, because it stresses the parents out when they have a baby who's ill. And I think that looking back on my situation, my mom was very sick when I was born, and I was very sick when I was born. So I was born actually C-section. They had to take me out like 2 months early. I was like way underweight and had to go into an incubator, and I was very, very sick because both of our bodies were trying to kill each other because we had the Rh factor blood going on, that Rh disease, where her blood was trying to kill me and my blood was trying to kill her in the womb. It was like trying to we were like poisoning each other. So they had to take me out a couple months early, and because my mom has that Rh disease thing. So we were both very sick when I was born. My mom was 38 years old. I was just a crazy, miserable, abusive mess when I was born. So it's really no wonder that there was no real bonding or no secure attachment formed between me and my mother, especially. Because she was my mother, so you figure that's where you would really hope that you would get that secure attachment, the secure bonds, the stability, the safety, right? But when you grow up in a home where there's a lot of abuse and there's a lot of hatred and anger and frustration and illness, mental illness as well as physical, the child's going to suffer from that because the parents aren't able to provide that for them. Even if I was a healthy baby and was a calm baby, I still would have probably been affected by that because my mother was not calm and she was not stable. So there you go. The caregiver says the caregiver's behaviors can impair bonding. Critical, rejecting, and interfering parents tend to have children that avoid emotional intimacy. Abusive parents tend to have children that become uncomfortable with intimacy and withdraw. The child's mother may be unresponsive to the child due to maternal depression, substance abuse, overwhelming personal problems, or other factors that interfere with her ability to be consistent and nurturing for the child. That's just it. Little babies need that stability. The little infants, they need that very stable, calm presence of especially the mother, right? The maternal person who's there to feed them and look after them, and whoever the caregiver is, really, they need somebody who's got their stuff together, right? Who's there for them and who is going to soothe them and comfort them, right? And if you don't have that, so many kids grow up like that. They do. And it does have a huge effect on people's lives. And then people have to sit back and wonder, say, what's the matter with that person? And it's like, well, if only you knew. A lot of times caregivers just can't provide what they really should be providing. And it's unfortunate because then people would say, well, look how many parents out there actually really mess up their children. I was talking about this the other day. And it's like, some people would say, well, if your parents hadn't had you, then, then you would, even though they were abusive and they abused you, you wouldn't be here. And that's true. I've had people tell me that just to point out the fact that I should be happy to be alive. And, especially when I was thinking, kind of I was depressed or something, people would say, well, if they didn't have you, then you wouldn't be here. And that's true. That's very true. But, why should a person have to suffer just because their parents couldn't pull it together? And that's the whole issue. And that's why I think, why should a child have to suffer just because two people decide to pop a child out and then abuse the child or kill the child, or, it doesn't give them an excuse. It doesn't make an excuse for the whole thing, right? It's just not right. But so many people, okay, well, hopefully you can hear me. I'm streaming properly and everything. Well, I hope you can hear me now. I've had a lot of problems with Skype this last, 2 or 3 weeks. I actually changed to a updated version of Skype, and it has really messed with my system because the old Skype seemed to work so much better. So I don't know. I don't think I can revert back to the old Skype, unfortunately. But let me know if you can hear me. Yeah, because I know it's not my headphones. It's the Skype connection. And so, yeah, the whole issue is like, so many children, just in the United States alone, they were saying they figure there's about 60 million survivors of child abuse in the United States alone. And that's the people that came forward and actually said, oh, thanks a lot, Gypsy Witch, I appreciate that, and actually said that they were abused as children, right? So many people have suffered with this stuff. And, so many times, and then, parents would say, well, it wasn't my fault, because that was my mom's excuse. She would be like, well, it wasn't my fault, because your father this and your father that and this and that, always blaming somebody else instead of taking responsibility for it and saying, you know what, I was a miserable mess. I'm sorry. You know what I mean? But she would never do that. She would never take responsibility for her behavior, and she would always just point a finger at somebody else and say, well, it was all your father, and he was always he was driving me crazy, and he drove me crazy, and I couldn't do a good job of looking after you. Because, I used to point this stuff out to my parents for many years. Actually, I made them sort of pay for what they did to me. Yeah, I certainly did, actually. After about the age of 22, 23 years old, I really started telling them like it was, because I figured, hey, what are they going to do? They can't kill me now. Ha-ha. So, back when I was younger, I didn't do too much speaking out against it, but that's because, I was then not trying to ask for another beating. But the whole issue is when I got older, I thought, what are they going to do now? Absolutely nothing. They were too old and too broken down to do anything, and I thought, now I can have my say. And I did get my say in on a lot of it, but they always had some sort of sad, silly excuse instead of just owning up to it. I would rather have my mom be honest and say, look, I couldn't cope, and it wasn't necessarily all your father's fault. Some of it was mine, and just because she wouldn't get help. She was depressed. She was manic depressive, suicidal. She was full of hatred and anger, and yet she could love other people's children. She could be nice and play cards with the neighbors. Anything that was going to be good for her. If she was going to have the opportunity to have a good day, let's say somebody invited her to lunch, then she could get away from the house, get away from the kids, get away from her husband. Then of course her mood would change. She'd be happy and she'd be like, oh yeah, I get to go with my friends, So off she'd go and have lunch, and then when she came home, the reality would set in. And she was married to this ridiculously abusive, nasty, hateful man who was my dad, and she had all of these these problems and all of this abuse going on in the home, and that she was actually part of the whole thing and was very abusive herself. And so, as soon as she got home, the fun was over, you know. So she could have fun, and she, the neighbors thought she was great. They'd be like, "Oh, we just love your parents," and I'd be like, "Okay, you don't have to live with these people. You know what I mean? You don't have to live with this abuse." And that's the sad part, is because abusers, and that's the thing. People say, "Well, abusers are very manipulative," but that's why, because abusers. Most people who abuse their children don't look like a specific type of monster walking around in some sort of a trench coat with, a bullwhip in one hand and a gun in the other. Most abusers are just people that just look like everybody else. They're regular-looking people. They probably have a lot of fun on the days that they're not abusing their children and each other. Right? This is sad fact about abusive families. Right? The parents will have some type of support outside of the home, and whether or not the people who are there befriend them outside of the home are going to look in on the kids, and especially even if they even realize that there's abuse going on, many of them won't do anything about it. Like I had a family, and I won't name names here because I know these people are still around, and I wouldn't. It's not that would want to get them in trouble, but I actually disclosed the abuse to this one family. They were asking me if my parents were fighting a lot. And we were on a trip to Kansas, and I was actually driving to Kansas with these people to go to stay with their grandmother for the summer, and with a friend of mine, right, and her parents. And the parents were like, "Do your parents fight a lot?" Because they knew my parents very well. My parents used to play cards at their house, and my parents used to hang around with these people, both my parents, and they really had a connection with my mother. And that's because this person was a friend of my oldest sister who kind of looked at my mom like her mom, right? But it's because her mom was abusive. And my mom was nice to her. Now, my mom was not nice to her own children, but she was nice to her. So my mom took care of my mother. My grandmother actually did that. My grandmother took in an orphan who lived across the street and treated her like gold, and then abused her own children. So my own grandmother did that to her own children. So my mom was doing that to her own children as well. So, it just passed on the behavior, that whole psychotic, abusive, ridiculous behavior. But anyway, these people, they asked if my parents were fighting a lot and stuff, and they used to see me kind of banged up and bruised up, and they used to see my mom hit me. So it's not like they didn't know, right? My mom would slap me around and knock me to the ground and push me around and curse at me, and quite often be running at me with a belt and stuff when these people were around. So they knew that the abuse was happening, right? But they just considered it discipline. They just thought, "Oh, well, she's a bad kid, she deserves it." And so, they asked me one time, they said, "Your parents fight a lot, don't they?" And I said, "Yes, they do." And I told them, I said, "Yeah, I even took a bat to my dad's head one time just recently, because I was about, 10, 11 years old when I was on this trip to go see my friend's grandmother in Kansas." And I said, "Yeah," I said, "I even hit my dad in the head with a bat because he was bothering my mom, and I didn't want him to hurt her, see?" So they were like, they just laughed. They thought it was funny. They didn't think there was anything wrong with the fact that a 10-year-old or a 9-year-old, actually it was about 9 years old, then a 9-year-old would take a bat to their dad's head to protect their mother. Right? I mean, that should have been a clue in right there. That would, especially knowing how my mom was treating me and how my dad was treating the other siblings, and they really didn't witness any interaction between me and my dad, really, because me and my dad didn't have much interaction when I was little, except for unless he was going to spank me or hit me or beat me with a belt or, this type of thing. And they didn't happen to see too much of that, but they did witness a lot of the stuff that my mom was doing to me. So they should have, they knew. Not only that, but see, this person was a friend of my sister who actually knew about the abuse that my sister was going through with my dad. So see, they knew about the abuse. But many times people they like the abusers, so they protect the abusers, right? And this is a sad, sad fact. Do I hold this against these people? No, not really, because they were just so ignorant. You know what I mean? Like, ignorance is not bliss, but it's just like, if I was going to hold anything against anybody, I hold it against my parents, who were the abusers, right? They should have never, ever been doing what they were doing. So it's my parents' fault, not the other people's fault. But the thing is that people many times will protect the abusers. Many times, almost always, because they have a connection to the abuser. It's like, well, we don't want to see, Barbara go to jail for for abusing her children, even though my parents were both brought up on abuse charges. And had there been any more laid, we would have been definitely removed from the home. Absolutely. So that's why people need to get involved and make sure that you do get involved. If you suspect a child's being abused and some child tells you that they had to take a bat to their dad's head because they feared for their mom's life, you better do something about it. Right? Because otherwise that kid's going to suffer in that home, which I did. I suffered dearly, you know what I mean? So I could have been killed, right? I mean, that's why people say, well, you should be happy and lucky that you should be happy that you're still here. And I used to pray for death, really. I mean, I used to curse God in the backyard. I'd be like, why did you not take me? You took other people around me. I mean, I used to curse at God and complain and gripe because he left me in that home knowing that I was not wanted, knowing that I was, there was no love between my parents and myself, you know what I mean, or in my other siblings for that matter. And I thought, why would he leave me in this home to suffer this garbage, this abuse, and he would take these other people around me? I was just really frustrated. That's how much I wanted out. I mean, I was begging and pleading God to take me. I was like, you have to take me. You can't take these other people and leave me here to suffer in this home. And, did I think about running away? Absolutely I did. And did I actually contemplate it? Sure I did. And did I actually do it? A couple of times. And, as a very young child, I was actually thinking about running away to the park and sleeping in this cement tube that was it was for the pipes underground. They actually had it there for kids to play on and to run through, like a little cement tube. And it was actually quite big, this thing. And I was actually thinking I could sleep in there. I could hide in that cement tube, So that was when I was about 5 or 6 years old. I was actually thinking about running away. And I used to sleep out and sleep around at other people's home, wherever I could sleep, really, quite often. Just if there was a lot of violence going on in the home, or I was afraid I was going to catch a beating or something, I'd stay away for a couple of days. But did I ever really pack my stuff and think that's it, split? No, and there was a lot of reasons for that. People would say, well, you should have. Not necessarily because the streets are not safer. I used to believe that the streets were safer than my home, but they're not. I used to run into a lot of sick individuals out there because I was out running around on the streets quite a bit, and I, almost was kidnapped like 5 times because of that, and ended up in a trucker's truck, driving down the road where he locked the doors and wasn't going to let me out, and he was telling me that he was going to, what would happen if he raped me, and I was about 15, 16 years old then, and I told him, I said, well, I'll kill you, that's what I'll do. And he said, really? And I said, yeah, absolutely, I'll kill you. I said, I took a bat to my dad's head, so I'm not afraid of you either, buddy, So I actually got out of that. But the thing is the streets are not safer. I knew this because I knew kids who were on the street. And so, I thought, well, the streets, die in my home or die on the streets, whichever, right? And also there was the issue of wanting to be accepted in my home, I mean, my mom was, I was the only child that my mom used to threaten to throw out of the house. So out of all of these siblings who were causing her all this grief, I was the last child to come into the home to be born. And for her to be wanting to throw me out and not these other siblings who were doing time in prison for all kinds of crimes and hurting the family and holding knives to people's throats and, ripping off and stealing all of the family stuff for drug money and this kind of stuff. And my mom was not threatening to throw them out and never did throw them out of the house, but she wanted to throw me out just because I think that she knew that I did not appreciate the way she was treating me, and I think that it was out of some sort of guilt thing, and she probably thought, yeah, I can't deal with her. Because so her attitude was, she'd be like, I just can't take her out. This is stuff she would tell other people when she was threatening to throw me out of the house. She'd be like, I can't take her attitude. I can't take her around this house. And I was 12, 13 years old, and really just wanting to be accepted into that family and accepted in, as one of the children, and not be singled out to be thrown out of the house, right? And so, of course, that bothered me. You know what I mean? To be the only child, to be the one to be the throwaway, the one that they want out of the house. And, that's harsh. That's a harsh place to be. And even today, my sister, who's 5 years older than me, holds me in the same kind of contempt that my mom did. So that's why I don't talk to her anymore, because I've given up on her toxic sisterhood relationship that I have with her. Is all toxic, right? She only wants me around to go shopping. She holds me in contempt for our childhood and likes to say that I was just this horrible, evil child and should have been thrown out of the house. And that, I told her about the sexual abuse, and she just sat there and never said a word. She's just cold. She's a cold, cold person. But she grew up in the same home I did, right? So what can you expect from people like that? So environment's a huge issue. It says a major impediment to healthy attachment is fear. If an infant is distressed due to pain, pervasive threat, or a chaotic environment, they will have a difficult time participating in even a supportive caregiving relationship. And infants or children in domestic violence, refugee, community violence, or war zone environments are vulnerable to developing attachment problems. And so, when you grow up around a lot of fear, a lot of violence, or even the threat of violence, the chaotic environment, of course children are going to have a hard time developing any kind of healthy attachment. So, it's absolutely harsh what this stuff does, and people think it's and would that's why my mom would never ever take responsibility for what she did, never, because she wanted to look like the good mother. She didn't want to think of herself as like the same kind of mother that her mother was, because my grandmother was a horrible, horrible woman. I talk a lot about her on my shows, but that's because it's not an excuse for my mom's behavior, not at all. But it's just the fact that it's just no wonder, you know what I mean, that my mom was the way she was, because my grandmother was this evil, twisted, horrible woman. I have no love for her in my heart at all. She's way gone. My grandmother passed away many, many years ago, and my mom did too. So there you go. But they were both. My mom actually became her mother. And that's sad. I don't think my mom intended to become her mother, but she eventually did become her mother, right? She was not capable, not able to show that love that she needed to be able to show, because of hatred, and because, at the end of the day, she was always sitting around, I hate this life, I hate myself, I hate this family, I hate my children. This is the kind of stuff we could expect to hear out of her mouth when we were growing up. I hate my husband, I hate you kids, right? And many times me and my sister, like I was talking before on a few shows ago, my sister and I would be 5, 6, 7 years old, and trying to console her, because she was trying to always contemplating suicide, and we'd be like, don't kill yourself, Mom, we love you. And she'd just be like, I hate you ungrateful, rotten children. And and that's when you could kind of expect a beating, right? And my mother, she was just so mentally ill. It's just like so many emotional problems, so mentally ill, and yet 2 days later could go and play cards with the neighbors, make cookies, and everything's just fine, right? With the neighbors, not with the family. But the neighbors just thought, oh, we love your parents, we love your mom and dad. And that's why, it's so important for people to realize that abusers, quite often are very manipulative, and they can turn it on and turn off their abuse. They don't, just because an abuser is abusing their family doesn't mean they're abusing the neighbors or their friends. Abusers quite often will abuse everyone in their family and then have the greatest relationships with people outside of the home. So it's very important for people to realize this. It's because they're happy when they're outside of the home, right? Of course they're not going to go beat up on their neighbors, right? They're going to save that for the family, right? So my mom would never curse at the neighbors. She was best friends with the neighbors. And then she'd come home and trash everybody, you know what I mean? And same with my dad. My dad had a whole group of people he hung around with at the church and with, outside of the home, and yet would come home from church and beat the crap out of his wife and his children, cursing everybody to hell, and talking about killing us that night. I'm going to kill you all, I'm going to kill us all, or whatever. He was suicidal as well. So that's abusers quite often are very, very manipulative and can move in and out of their psychosis, you know what I mean? And that's why it's very important for people to realize that. And if you suspect a child's being abused, you do the right thing and you get that child some help. And if you know that parents are abusing their children, for God's sake, don't hang around with those stupid parents. You know what I mean? You do something about it and you get that child some help. So I'm so thankful for these people that stepped in for me when I was 13 and a half. Because I'm telling you what, that was the first time I actually felt like a human being in my entire lifetime. Some sort of decency instead of being kicked around like a dog. I mean, I used to go to their house, and they actually set a place for me at their table. And there was no threat of violence. There was no, they were good, decent, loving people who stepped in for me. So, make sure, if you know a child is hurting, you make sure that you do something to get that child some help, right? Thanks everybody for being here. I appreciate it. I'll be back on tonight on Dreamcatchers Talk Radio, here on Blog Talk Radio, covering the headlines as well. Then tomorrow morning, back here for One Child Abuse Survivor to another. And if you need something, get a hold of me here on Blog Talk Radio or send me a message on Facebook or whatnot. Thanks, Gypsy Witch, for being here. I appreciate you being here. I just love you so much. And I hope you have a good trip there in Australia. And I hope it all works out for you and goes well. And I'll keep you in my heart. And I'll be talking to you real soon. So everybody have a great day, and we'll talk to you later. Bye-bye.